You might be carrying the most dangerous type of fat in your body right now and not even know it. You can't see it. You can't pinch it, but it's silently wrapping around your organs, damaging your hormones, slowing your metabolism, increasing your risk for heart disease, stroke, and even cancer. This is called visceral fat, and no one talks about this, but I'm going to break it down for you today. It could be the hidden thing stopping you from losing weight, no matter how hard you try. Today, I'm going to show you how to find out if you have it and the exact steps to burn it off for good. What even is visceral fat, and why have you never heard of it before? Most people focus on the fat that you can grab, and I want you to even do this right now. Grab your stomach if you're sitting in a chair. The things you can hold on to right under your skin is called subcutaneous fat. So when we're referring to belly fat, when we're referring to love handles, when we're referring to back fat, all the stuff we could pinch, that is called subcutaneous fat. But visceral fat is different. Visceral fat is deep fat. So you can't touch it. You can't even necessarily see it, but it can be deadly. And what visceral fat does is it wraps around your organs, like your liver, your pancreas, and your intestines, and you can't touch it, but it's there. And the reason why it matters and why visceral fat is something you should put a lot of energy and focus towards getting rid of is because visceral fat can really mess with your hormones. It can also increase inflammation, raise your risk of heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and even cancer. And it's not just about your looks, but it's about your overall lifestyle. People who have too much visceral fat on their body do not live a high quality of life. Too much visceral fat can lead to insulin resistance, high blood pressure, cortisol overload, and screw with your hormones big time. And so for you not to put focus towards this, you're doing yourself a disservice. Now, how do you know if you even have it in the first place? So there's a couple ways you could track visceral fat, and this is absolutely something I recommend you getting data on. My favorite way to figure out how much visceral fat you have is number one, to get a DEXA scan. So a DEXA scan is something that I recommend my clients doing at least twice a year to get their overall data for their body. So what the DEXA scan is going to do, it's going to tell you how much visceral fat you have. It'll tell you how much subcutaneous fat you have. It's going to tell you where you're distributing fat in different areas of your body. Another cool thing about a DEXA scan is it's going to tell you where your muscle mass is distributed in your body as well. So one of my favorite things about doing a DEXA scan is if I do a DEXA scan, when I'm doing a cut, I can tell how much muscle mass I've been able to preserve or even gain. And so doing DEXA scans when you're starting a new phase in your fitness journey can be extremely helpful. Now that's number one, and it does cost money to get a DEXA scan done. You got to go get tested, and if you want to find one, literally just Google DEXA scan near me and you should be able to find one. But the second way to do this, and probably the easiest way, is to check your waist to hip ratio. So statistically, men who have a waistline over 40 inches are at a higher risk of having more visceral fat. Women who have a waistline over 35 inches have a higher risk of visceral fat. So if you're in any of those categories, then chances are you do have a good amount of visceral fat on your body. Another thing to do is really just watch your gut. If your belly is constantly bloated or inflamed, that's another sign that you probably have visceral fat on your body. Have you ever heard of the term beer belly? Where do you think that comes from? Beer belly refers to the visceral fat that I have in my body. And so people who drink alcohol consistently, oftentimes they have a lot of visceral fat. Now, how do you get rid of visceral fat and what should you do? Obviously, your goal is dropping body fat. And as your body drops body fat, it will drop visceral fat. But there are some specific things we could do to help your body speed up the process of losing visceral fat. Losing visceral fat is different than losing subcutaneous fat, aka the fat you could see and touch, because losing visceral fat isn't about a 6-week challenge. So you can't just go on some 3-month thing or some hardcore, I'm going to do this in the next 21 days. No, losing visceral fat is about changing your lifestyle from the inside out. So you can't lose visceral fat with a quick fix or a fast or whatever you do to get rid of body fat quickly. Losing visceral fat is actually a long-term process, and it starts with checking your overall lifestyle. So here's what actually works. The first thing you should do right now, if you're serious about decreasing visceral fat and increasing your overall quality of life, is cutting out alcohol. Like I said before, the beer belly thing, guess where that's from? Too much visceral fat. So what do I do to get rid of the beer belly? I cut out the beer and the alcohol. Alcohol leads to belly fat, period. It raises cortisol, it lowers testosterone, and it even slows your metabolism. Now, I know for some people, alcohol is a part of their lifestyle. So maybe alcohol is something you do for work, like you have to go out with clients to drink, or alcohol is something you do when you go on date nights. You like to have a glass of wine. Cool. I'm not here to judge. But the thing I am here to do is encourage you to cut your alcohol intake to literally as least as possible. If you can live your life without it, then I absolutely recommend just cutting it completely because it really doesn't serve you. For me personally, I've just found that my life is better without alcohol than it is with alcohol. Once I cut alcohol out of my life, like everything improved. And if you haven't done that, if you haven't tried it, I would recommend trying it. You can have just as good, if not a better time in life without alcohol than you can with it. And so I think for everybody, if you drink alcohol, you should at least set an alcohol limit. And so you shouldn't just be like, I'm going to cut down on alcohol consumption. No, set an actual number for yourself. So if right now you're currently drinking 5 to 6 drinks per week, what would it look like for you to cut that down to 3? If right now maybe you have 3 drinks per week, what would it look like for you to cut the 3 drinks per week down to 3 drinks per month? And so the goal is just to limit or minimize alcohol consumption as much as possible. And this will have a big impact not only on your hormones, but also on the visceral fat you have on your body. The second thing you want to do is focus on a 90-10 diet. And so this is the flexible dieting principle that I believe is a game changer for people, not only because it's going to help you drop body fat, but it helps you sustain the body fat you drop for long periods of time. Most people have a all or nothing approach. They're either 100% eating clean or they're 100% not eating clean. 90% of your diet should be real, whole, single ingredient, nutrient dense foods. Now, what is a single ingredient, nutrient dense food? Super simple. Think about something like steak, eggs, salmon, fish, vegetables, things that are one item. That's it. Super simple. And so if most of your calories come from these type of foods, then it's going to decrease inflammation and decrease your visceral fat on your body. Also, what it does is it actually fills you up more. So the more single ingredient, nutrient dense foods you have, the less cravings you're going to have, the less hunger you're going to have, and the more energy you will have to sustain this for long periods of time. Another thing you want to cut out of your diet is added sugars and ultra processed foods. And so I don't believe in completely cutting out sugars or completely cutting out ultra processed foods because I believe mastering nutrition and getting rid of visceral fat is a marathon, not a sprint. And so for most people that are like, I'm never going to eat sugar ever again in my life, or they're like, I'm never going to eat ultra processed foods ever again, it only lasts them for a little bit of time. But the people who are like, I'm going to allow 10% of my diet to be these foods are the ones who can sustain it for longer periods of time. And by longer periods of time, I'm not talking just months, I'm talking years. So 10% of your diet can be flexible. And so the way I like to break this down is 90% of your calories are nutrient dense and 10% of your calories are flexible. So let's say, for example, your daily calories right now to be in a calorie deficit is 2,000. So what that means is 90% of those calories, which is 1,800, should be single ingredient nutrient dense foods: eggs, steak, chicken breast, potatoes, etc. But that gives me 10% flexibility to have more fun foods. So think cookies, chips, protein ice cream, things like that, which is 200 calories. And so for me personally, if I have 10% flexibility for foods like that, I'm like, this is a cakewalk and I can sustain this for long periods of time. And what I found is that is a sweet spot for most people with eating a cleaner diet, but also being able to fit in the foods you love sustainably long term. The third thing you want to do is you want to lift heavy weights. So you should be strength training a minimum of 3 times per week. Ideally, I would say 3 to 5. What lifting weights is going to do, it's going to build the lean muscle, which helps optimize your hormones. It helps keep your energy high. And the more muscle mass you build, the more body fat you're going to burn, even at rest. And so a lot of people that have extra visceral fat or even subcutaneous fat on their body, they're so focused on fat loss. So they go to the gym and they do a ton of cardio, they do a ton of HIIT exercises and HIIT classes. And yes, that's good for the short term, but it's not good for the long term. Because what happens to your body is if you over prioritize cardio, your body becomes resistant to it. And so in order to get the same effects when all you do is cardio, you have to do more of it. But here's the beauty of lifting weights. Your body has a positive adaptation to weightlifting. So the more weights that I lift, the stronger I get, the more calories I burn, which is amazing. So if someone went to the gym and they only did cardio, over time, they will burn less and less calories because their body adapts to it. If someone goes to the gym and they only lift weights and they continue to get stronger, they have a positive adaptation. So the more weights they lift, the more calories they burn. This is why people who prioritize muscle building number 1, cardio number 2 in the gym always see better results than people who prioritize cardio number 1 and muscle building number 2. Now, I'm not saying don't do cardio. Cardio is absolutely a part of this regimen, but strength training is first, cardio is second. The fourth thing that I want you to focus on is I want you to focus on increasing your daily movement. And so what this means is you should have a step minimum. So I think for most people, if you get a minimum of 8,000 steps per day, you will absolutely decrease your ability to pack on visceral fat. Now, walking isn't sexy, but it works. I remember when I first was told, oh, Trent, you need to walk to burn more calories and walk to burn more body fat. I was like, but walking doesn't make me sweat. And that was literally the thought process I had. But what's cool about walking is you don't have to sweat to burn calories. You don't have to sweat to drop body fat. Fat loss isn't about crushing yourself. It's about being consistent. So for people who can actually just focus on steps, 8 to 10,000 per day, it's not that hard. They're able to stay consistent more long term. Now, you can even do some incline walking if you want to speed things up a little bit to get yourself into a zone 2 range. So if you don't know what zone 2 cardio is, Zone 2 cardio is basically just any cardio where your heart rate is 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. Now, here's the formula to figure out what your max heart rate is. I want you to take 220 and subtract your age. So let's say, for example, you are 40 years old right now. You're going to take 220 minus 40, which equals 180. Now I'm going to take 60 to 70% of that number, which will come out to 108 to 126. So how do I know if I'm in a zone 2 range for cardio? I know that I'm 60 to 70% of my max heart rate. So for someone who's 40 years old, that's 108 to 126 is my zone 2 range. So if you're doing cardio on the treadmill and you increase it to an incline, that will help you get into that heart rate zone. Another bonus you could do for your cardio is you could even do 1 to 2 HIIT sessions, high intensity interval training sessions per week. But don't do too much, because what happens is when people do too much HIITs, they do too much high intensity training, like the HIIT classes, the group fitness classes. This actually increases cortisol and it increases craving. So what I found is that when people focus too much on this, they burn a lot more calories, yes, but they end up eating more calories because their body is just craving carbs and they're craving more food. When people prioritize steps, walking, zone 2 cardio, they end up burning more body fat, not because they burn more calories during their cardio sessions, but because they're able to sustain it long term because it's easier on their body and their cravings are lower. The next thing that has a massive impact on visceral fat is managing your stress. When you're chronically stressed out, you have chronic high cortisol. The more cortisol you have in your body, the more belly fat you have on your body and the more visceral fat you have on your body. What are you doing to manage stress? Because I hope it's not going to food. Because if you deal with stress with food, it's going to bite you in the butt. And here's the thing with dealing with stress with food. Every time you run to the pantry to deal with feeling overwhelmed, anxious, depressed, or stressed out, yes, the food makes you feel better for the short term, the next 5 minutes. But after you're done chewing and after your body breaks down the food, the problem you're dealing with always comes back. So you have to have methods to manage your stress. So next time you get stressed, don't run to the pantry. Go on a 10-minute walk. Go do a workout, pray, journal, breathe. You're not lazy, you're just overwhelmed. So you have to deal with your stress and you cannot overlook this. Next, I want you to prioritize your sleep. The less sleep you have, the more ghrelin you have, which is one of your hunger hormones. So it's not that when you sleep less, your body just magically packs on more body fat and visceral fat. But what happens is when you sleep less, your body craves more food because your ghrelin hormone is up. So if you're sleep deprived all the time, you will have more visceral fat and you'll have more cravings and hunger over time. Again, this is about changing your lifestyle. And so the first thing you might be thinking is, there's no way I could sleep more. Like, I'm so busy right now. You don't have an option to do this. If you're serious about losing visceral fat and increasing your overall quality of life, you have to prioritize your sleep. The more ghrelin, the more cravings, period. So you have to focus on getting 7 hours of sleep minimum. Like, protect your rest. Even for myself, I got 4 kids. So sleep isn't something that's easy for me, but I've worked really hard at making sure I'm getting a minimum of 7 hours of sleep per night, because I know it's not only good for my mental health, but it's also vital for my physical health. It's crazy because we literally sleep 1/3 of our lives and people don't even prioritize this. You need to put more energy and more effort towards maximizing your sleep. You might feel like, oh, you can just manage life with minimal sleep. However, the goal isn't to manage life. The goal is to thrive in life. And if you truly want to thrive in life, then you have to finally master your sleep habits. And I'm not talking about sleeping 9 hours a night, because I don't sleep 9 hours a night, but focus on getting a minimum of 7. Now, how do I do this if I really want to improve my sleep? The first thing is I want you to focus on the 10-3-2-1-0 method. And this is all this means. 10 hours before bed, you cut caffeine. 3 hours before bed, you cut big meals. 2 hours before bed, you cut water. 1 hour before bed, you cut electronics. 0 is you never hit the snooze button. That is the principle to mastering your sleep. Now, some easy practicals to sleep better is get blue light blockers before bed. So if you could put on blue light blockers 1 to 2 hours before going to sleep, especially if you watch TV or you're on your phone before going to bed, this is going to help with your circadian rhythm. And another thing that has helped me massively is going to sleep and waking up at the same time every single day. Literally, even just sleeping 30 extra minutes per night can be a game changer when it comes to losing visceral fat. The thing with visceral fat is you cannot out-train a bad lifestyle. You really can't. I don't care how hard you work out. I don't care how much cardio you do. If you're not sleeping good, if you're overly stressed, if your diet is filled with ultra-processed foods, losing visceral fat will be challenging. Yes, you might lose the subcutaneous fat, but the fat that improves your quality of life is the visceral fat, and this requires a brand new lifestyle. Visceral fat and getting rid of it is a result of what you do every single day for the rest of your life. And the goal is to get our visceral fat as low as possible. So losing visceral fat is about how you eat, it's about how you move, it's about how you handle stress, and it's not a 30-day challenge. It's the new way of living for you. It's about choosing discipline over comfort, and you either sacrifice now or you make the sacrifice later. You choose. So if you're serious about getting healthy from the inside out, it starts with one decision, and that's this. That's making the change today that I'm going to live a life with as least visceral fat as possible, and I'll fight for it because I know that I deserve it. The first step I want you to take after you watch these videos, I want you to go get your visceral fat measured. So you can either do the waist to hip ratio and literally just Google it, how to do it to figure it out, or you can go get a DEXA scan, which is definitely something I recommend most people doing. And then from there, you can start to track your progress to drop your visceral fat as low as you can. And if you're tired of going in circles with your body and you want more accountability and you actually want structure to getting rid of visceral fat, what I want you to do is apply for coaching in the link in the description below, and I'll reach out directly to you so we can chat to see if I can help. Let's get this fat off for good. God bless, and I'll see you on the next one.